So first of all, I want to just say, good afternoon. It's really nice to see everybody here and really appreciate having you here in person. And wanting to just kind of highlight a few things, but also open it up for questions, because I think you probably have more questions than anything else. I also want to say again, I think we're pretty remarkable when I look around nationally, talking to the presidents. I think, many of the conditions that some of the presidents are facing are fairly profound, largely because, again, all of you have been really committed to understanding the importance of keeping our students engaged, thinking about them, and moving forward to ensure that they get the best education possible. And in fact, it was interesting. I was walking earlier today and I heard a group of students making a comparison. These were students who weren't in our enrolled, but prospective students. And they were comparing us to USD and all the wonderful reasons why San Diego State was better. And this was unprompted. So it was really nice to hear that too. So I want to just talk about some of the things that I want to share with you today is that.
You're free to sit.
Oh, good. You're letting me sit down. Thank you. Well, I don't want to get you exposed. Maybe not. I'm going to stay my distance here. First of all, you're going to hear Provost Chong. He's going to talk about some of the enrollment issues and targets. Again, we're doing very, very well. We're now at this level that we never thought was possible, officially over 144,000 students, not all enrolled through the state side, some through Global Campus, but nonetheless, I don't think we would have thought even when I came, when we're about 135,000, that would have been even possible. And as we move forward, we're going to have to think about how we move forward. And the reason for that largely is because in the context of the budgetary environment, there is uncertainty. There's uncertainty from the federal level. There's uncertainty from the state level. So I do think we've done a good job and we're navigating it, but we also have to be creative in how we do that. The other thing I wanted to mention, because Hala shared this with me, and I know shared to a lot of the research faculty here, is the fact that, we are in the middle of this government shutdown. For those who aren't following the news or who haven't been flying, know that it's pretty difficult right now to get out of some airports. But I'm really grateful that the foundation board and members of the board agreed that, we have enough cash on hand to help our research faculty as they weather their storm. And then in particular, I think Hala's worked with everyone to spend down appropriately during this period. At the same time, some of you may have heard, but we received one of the largest grants about 10 days ago in the College of Education, a $30 million grant, which is remarkable. And I want to give the correct kudos to the person who did this. So this was for the National Vocational Rehab Tech Assistance Center in the College of Ed. And it was led by Professor Mark Tucker. So I want to personally acknowledge him for this project. So one of the things that's interesting about this is again, this is one of the largest awards in that received by San Diego State and in the College of Ed. Of course, it's the largest one. So it's within a context of a department that's shrinking for us to receive that. On top of that, there were a number of other awards that came in to the College of Ed. So pretty remarkable. And Hala shared with me before she left that our faculty are really industrious and have continued to do record applications. And if you look at where we are right now, of course, this is a huge award, so it makes a difference, and it's over 5 years. We really are where we were last year, which is even though we're down a bit, to be at this point, recognizing all the uncertainty really speaks to the tenacity and the determination of the faculty, the belief in the research, the quality of the research that's being done, and the fact that even during these very fraught political times, our faculty are being rewarded. So this is important. And it's important also, I think, for our graduate students who are committed to be engaged in this research, who are involved in the research. So I just want to say this gives me hope, and I should give us all some hope. The other big issue I want to share is our philanthropic goal. We've had the highest philanthropic goal we've ever had this year, $142 million. And why is that important? Many of our donors come into SDSU through athletics. Oftentimes their first gift is in that area. But what we're seeing now, which has been very, very critical, is a real opening and support for programs, not just scholarships, but faculty endowments, supporting of the Career Center. I could go on, and a sense of pride when I speak to alumni. So I'm going to often many, many different dinners, talking to different people. More recently, I was in Chicago meeting with about 10 former Aztecs who were donors and very successful entrepreneurs. And the one thing they do want to do is give back. But what's important is the story that I tell about not only one area, but many areas, to allow them to get engaged in an area that they feel is important. So the fact that we're at this point means that we have a tremendous opportunity for growth. And to put it in perspective, I think within the CSU system, over the period in which we've been fundraising, we have reached about $2 billion in funding. Now, that's not the endowment. The endowment's $500 million. But to get to $500 million is pretty remarkable given how young we are in this process. So I also want to thank, because a lot of the deans, a number of the faculty are critical in telling the story of why to give. And they have been very laser focused in helping us in this area. So I just want to give some kudos there. The other top I wanted to spend some time on is some of the national context, because I think that's important before I talk about some other areas. So I was struck, and I'll go back to the other topics I had here, that I think every day we're seeing in the national landscape a discussion about higher education, a transition in higher education, a new executive order. But about October 3rd, President Milliken of UC sent out a very, I think, important letter about what was occurring at UC. And UC, similar to us, is a system, but within the context, I just wanted to share with you that he was very eloquent in really talking about this. So I want to just abbreviate what he had said. So if we think about what's happening, many of the EEOC investigations and OCR investigations are reshaping higher education. They're affecting academic freedom, they're affecting free speech, they're affecting the tenor, the ability of institutions to obtain federal funds. If you think about UC, they depend on $17 billion just to maintain their own organization. And this includes not just the federal funding for research, but also the medical schools that rely heavily on Medi-Cal. And then if we really want to speak directly to the CSU system, obviously, when we talk about all federal Pell Grant funding, funding for student loans, all of that is important. So that's why I think the impact is being felt across the board. So he basically put out, and if you have a chance, it's worth reading his letter, alerting the UC community to the breadth of the investigations underway. And what he said was, he noted that, and I'm paraphrasing this, that all 10 UC campuses are under scrutiny for matters ranging from anti-Semitism, admissions practices, and foreign gifts to the consistency of responses to civil rights complaints. One of the things that he framed, I think, very well, and I haven't seen a system leader nationally approach it this way, was how the UC had to comply with oversight. And there's been a lot of criticism about what occurred at Berkeley in relationship to information distributed. But what they did is place it within the context about their legal authority, privacy safeguards, and institutional obligations. So when you're dealing with an EEOC or OCR complaint, basically the way it's being framed, of course, is it is putting pressure on institutional autonomy, right? Because essentially you have an obligation to fulfill the requirements and requests of federal agencies when you get federal funding. And so in this case, he referred to the fact that this is not just a UC issue. The federal government, through EEOC, OCR, and related agencies, is testing boundaries of institutional autonomy, data compliance, and academic freedom. But in UC's case, subpoenas have sought unredacted civil rights case files and identifying data of faculty who signed open letters. So the university ultimately agreed to release under legal compulsion, acknowledging the difficult balance between legal obligations and protecting individual privacy. And I think what's important here is when you look at OCR complaints, civil rights legislations passed in 1964, and actually this year, Michael Drake agreed on a settlement because of the OCR complaint, particularly in cases that affected UCLA, UC San Diego, and I believe it was UCR. So the precedent of the requirement to provide this information is a legal requirement that the institution the system robustly examined in terms of its legal rights, its institutional obligations. And indeed, the fact that if you look at precedent in the past, meaning since this law has been around, they have done this before. It isn't like they haven't done this. And I think they wanted to clarify that. But I do think why I'm bringing this up to you is how UC moves forward. We have to watch very carefully, right? This is not something that's going to be out of a vacuum. And the reason I want to share that is that in this process is the request for personal information. And I think that's the most sensitive area when we talk about privacy. People are most sensitive to those issues. And so that tension between the public accountability and privacy is something that I think we're going to see debated. And it's going to be echoed throughout, I think, every higher education institution. Now, fast forward to now, I think most of you received the letter that the CSU is also in an investigation. That EEOC investigation is as a class, meaning it is focused on anti-Semitism. There's also an OCR investigation that also is focused as a class, meaning all 22 institutions in the system. It's not an individual. However, with the EEOC one, the only one that is publicly discussed that I'm aware of is the investigation into Cal State LA. And that is where the information has been, the discovery on personal names and information has been provided. I want to be very clear and transparent to you that San Diego State, to my knowledge, and that, again, how these go, or they go to the system, we are not implicated in the EEOC complaint at all. That doesn't mean that something could not happen. But I do think that it's important for you to know that I'm going to keep you appraised of this and where we stand so that there is nothing hidden in the process or nothing transparent that you don't feel is transparent. In terms of the OCR complaint, that was with what was called the PhD project. So the PhD project was a nonprofit entity that worked with primarily universities to advertise jobs in primarily colleges of business, with the idea of, again, diversifying, if you will, the professoriate, and the CSU had a contract. And so in that case, there were institutions, including San Diego State, that advertised, but it was an advertising entity, meaning the CSU had the contract. It would be a procurement like any other procurement that we would have. We have procurements for many different areas that we share. But at no case, I want to be very clear, was it used other than for advertisement. It had no influence whatsoever in any kind of decision-making or hiring. Nonetheless, it's part of that investigation. Again, I'm not anticipating a negative, issue. The CSU has actually removed any of the advertisements available to that. And we're hoping that the compliance issue or the OCR review is okay. Now, I happen to be able to find the OCR review that occurred in 2024 of the UC system from their complaint. So I started reading and I've gone through 10 pages. It's like 30 pages of legalese. You know, when I looked at it, it seemed fairly objective. The issue really is the penalty, right? So when you read the report that was produced by the Office of Civil Rights, you go through it. Yes, there are things that definitely could have been improved on, right? I could, objectively looking at the analysis for the UC. But the $1 billion fine on UCLA was a bit much, right? Usually the magnitude of the complaint is measured with the magnitude of the penalty. So why am I going around this roundabout discussion? I'm going about it because that's something where there is uncertainty. In other words, there doesn't appear to be necessarily a balance on the penalty with the outcome. If you look at past experiences with OCR complaints. So just again, want to put it on your radar. I don't know the crystal ball. I'm not concerned about our institution. You know, I feel we have done a very good job here, but we are part of a class. We're part, and because of that, that can affect the penalty in a different way, meaning we may suffer the consequences of what happens at Cal State LA or at Humboldt or any of the schools where you had, let's say, some severe outcomes in relationship to the allegations. So I want you to pause to see if there are any questions on this at all. Yes.
So these things are coming down. Thank you, first of all, for presenting this. I know it's a moving target of what's happening. As we're seeing what's happening, whether it is in CSULA and the UC system, what are we doing proactively here? So there are certain things maybe that they're asking for that they shouldn't be asking for. And I'm thinking like sometimes of things that we're keeping record of that we shouldn't be keeping record of. Like, are we doing something proactive to protect our students, our faculty, our staff, everyone that works for this institution? And how are we doing that?
Well, I think, so if you look at what happened with UCLA, and I think the approach of the investigations that occurred, largely when there's an investigation, this is something that I wasn't quite as aware of, but reading more documentation of what's occurring. When there is a complaint, that information is available to the OCR. So once the OCR complaint goes in, the most that can happen is a redacting of information of names, right? But then again, the OCR can also ask to non-redact it. So we happen, and I think this is where I feel very good, is we have a very, very robust Title IX process. We have very good intake. We have very good professionals. We have probably the best investigators. So I think that the process here is probably the strongest. I'll be honest, I've talked to people within the CSU system. So that is actually a benefit. But essentially in the case that would be similar to this, meaning to what I'd say comparable would be Cal State LA, I don't know how strong the internal process is to do that. Because really the way the investigator intakes information and provides that information and the witnesses and how well and how objective it is. If you have somebody who's biased or not skilled, that can make a huge impact in what is actually delivered to OCR. So that to me is one of the biggest risks. But from my point of view, I'm not worried about how we handle the data. I'm not worried about how we, secure the data. But I think my biggest concern is less about us, but rather inferences from other institutions where that isn't as clear, where those processes aren't as strong. I don't, that's a roundabout answer, but that's how we are doing it. And I think that's the best way to do it, is making sure your processes are solid. Any other question on this? Okay, so I will keep you appraised on that. I think, am I on time? I don't want to be. I have 1 minute.
I said you're at 19 minutes, so about 6 more minutes.
Okay. So, but I did want to kind of highlight this, dovetails well with what we're saying. So we are part of a system. So I did want to be clear on this. So we are going to maintain through our Office of General Counsel, clear compliance, making sure that we are compliant, and we're constantly in communication with our legal team on that. So that's something that's important. And if there's certain questions you want us to ask, we're happy to ask generally, not specifically, because obviously we're not representing you as individuals, but we certainly can do that. So, and the other piece that I'm very concerned about is what I think you're alluding to is strong privacy considerations. To the extent that before we move forward on anything, we're very clear of protecting privacy. Again, that's something in the system level, but that's something that I'm going to be asking Don Theodora, who's the head of OGC. Are we doing what UC has been doing, which is ensuring that the privacy considerations, the legal requirements are being met as well? The second piece is I want to be transparent, and for all of those here who feel there's a lack of transparency or you need more transparency, I want to make sure. I think you really can't have shared governance without transparency. And I think the only instance when I can't is when, again, it's within the context of an investigation or their legal requirements, but I want to make sure that those guiding principles are there. And I just want to make sure we don't talk about it all, but we've been an institution that has always led with a belief of academic freedom being part of one of our core values. And I want us to always remember that that is very, very important. If we can lead in a way that's responsible in this way, I think we could really be measured at a different level, meaning from a national point of view and from a local point of view. I think many people have shied away from that, but I think we've been leaning into it. And we've been doing it through, I think, many of our approaches of handling the diverse opinions that exist here. So I do think it's going to be important to always remember that and to ask those questions when it appears that we're not leading in that way. In other words, I think this is the time for robust dialogue of this way and to lean into it. So I just wanted to make sure that we are doing that and that we're also strategic. And I say strategic in the case that, our faculty have done, as I mentioned this, an amazing job with the enrollment growth and with the funding. And I think that we need to recognize the opportunities to reward that behavior. And we've been talking about how do we support you as you move forward in this area, because there will be some opportunities. It doesn't mean we have to acquiesce to any specific. We're not part of the 9 select universities that have been asked to respond to an executive letter, but we also can do quite a bit by responding deeply in the good work that we do with our research and teaching and seeking those opportunities. And to the extent that we can help with that, that would be through DRI or actually working with our lobbyists that we have in Washington, D.C. in certain areas. We're here to help. So I want to make sure that's important. So I had some other things that I wanted to talk about, but at this point, I think those are the main things that I want to give time back to you.
Thank you. Are there any further questions?
Yeah. Yes.
Good afternoon. Just for clarification, I guess, well, because we received the letter from Mildred and we've received different kind of communication as to whether at this point it's only engagement with the CSU system-wide council, or is there any direct engagement with Jessica Rental? And the reason I asked for is the communication part, right? If there's any updates and it's only with CSU, how does that information then trickle down to the different campuses?
That's a very good question. So because this is a CSU investigation, all communications are going through the CSU to La Monica, and then we push them out. And that's how the communication is, because legal counsel is not localized. And Jessica is the head of HR, but she doesn't represent the institution. So there's a difference. Our Office of General Counsel is housed in Long Beach. Our legal counsel is housed in Long Beach. So whenever we have a legal matter, we work with the system-wide, even though we have a delegated legal individual who is our representative. That's how it goes. But it's a good question. What we try to do, to the extent possible, is when we get information, is to get it out to you as soon as possible. And if there's issues of clarity needed, we appreciate comments, because then Brittany and LaMonica can go back to the CO office and say, this isn't very clear. And believe it or not, what probably you've read in the paper is as accurate as you're going to get in terms of what the complaint. So if you read EdSource, it's as good as what we have. Any other questions? If not, thank you.
I usually would report tenure track searches and stuff, but this year we don't have. We have a chill, so we don't have any lines other than 5 carry forwarded lines and a few donor funded lines. Okay, they are in progress. As far as enrollment. As you can see, the highlight for this slide, I know you all have these slides for a week now, so I don't need to read them and explain in detail, but I just want to point out a couple of things. If you look at the last 2 columns at the bottom, right, the business school and arts and letters, they kind of flip-flop this year. Right, so we limited the enrollment to business school and increased numbers for arts and letters, because some of those departments, they want more students, they could use more students. So we have a total of about 2.2%. Okay, above the target. So we're every year we're fine tuning so that we don't fall below the target, right? So that we can avoid additional enrollment based financial budget cuts. So next slide. As far as transfers, as you can see, is somewhere between the last 2 years. Okay, so it's pretty flat. The next slide. Graduate students, roughly the same. Okay, and we were really worried about some of the visa interview cancellations happening during the summer, but I think we came out not so bad after all. And there are still some students who couldn't get their interview schedule in time, so they defer to spring semester. Next slide. Imperial Valley, we've been trying to grow Imperial Valley. They have room. They want more students, so we've been trying to help them. Next. So this is roughly where we are, about 2% above the target that we were given. And this year, as previous years, a lot of uncertainty. So we needed to make sure that we have enough to survive any kind of melt, last minute melt. So we came out okay. Next. So spring will be very small, relatively small. We are not taking a lot of students. And maybe 50 additional graduate students who defer from fall to spring. Next. This is a slide I want to spend some time on, a couple of minutes. This is from July, as you remember, the BBB, and we have the parents' loan being capped, right? And so that's gonna, all of these will impact some of our students. And the Grad Plus loans are eliminated, right, starting July 2026. And then the graduate student loans will be capped at 20,500 per year or 100,000 lifetime, right? And for professional schools, about 50K a year or 200K lifetime. So a lot of professional school students will be really impacted, and well, all graduate students, right, will be impacted. And then some workforce Pell impact. And the last one is something I want to spend a little bit. ROI, we've been talking about this with some deans and some department chairs. We had these chairs and directors retreats at the beginning of the semester. The president and I hosted those every semester now for 3 years. And we talk about this, and Department of Education is looking into these data, right? So they want to make sure that all the majors, after they get their degrees, the graduates are making more than those students who never got these degrees, right? Or high school graduates, for example. So it was the first week, second week of July, right? That was passed, and I happened to be in Washington D.C. Mid-July, so I dropped in and talked to with Stephen Hyman and Chip. We stopped by Department of Education and talked to Undersecretary Bajaran, and we talk a little bit about how they are measuring these things, right? Because they have to be careful. We need to make sure that we have these numbers, and also we have to have like 5 years worth of numbers, right? Before we can really say anything meaningful about these ROIs, right? And so those are coming, and so we're looking at all these numbers. In fact, APLU has a website you can look up, and they've been tracking some of these for different universities, for different degree programs, and they've been tracking, and you can see that they listed 2 of our majors in there. And the undersecretary was actually looking at the same website. But at the time, that was 2 weeks after the BBB was passed. So they didn't have any of their own data yet, but they're going to be looking at all these numbers based on IRS numbers and everything else. So we've been talking about that with a lot of other department chairs and deans. That's it. I think that's the last slide, right? So I'll be glad to answer any questions you might have. Yes.
Thank you. So you said we still have a hiring chill.
Yes.
And so I wonder whether the position for vice provost for academic affairs is also a carryover, or is that a new position? And if it's the latter, then what would be the rationale for
Well,
that?
it's a current position, right? We have that position. It's been filled by an interim position, so we need to make that permanent.
Chair Carter Curtis.
Thank you, Vice Chair Day. So as you know, I work with the advising team in PSFA, and we continue to have concerns. And one of the things I wanted to talk about is we spent 10 months on a study last year, the Excellence in Academic Advising Study, and we made specific recommendations that to date have not been implemented or addressed. Specifically, our advising community meeting has gone away, which was a place for our coordinated care advisors and our major advisors to congregate, get updates, share, coordinate. Awards began in 24-25, and now we want to know what happens with those. The EAB training, we have been included in those conversations and we're grateful. But our priority remains the classification and position descriptions that were recommended in the EAA study. And so we need to know what the specific status is because we really need to work toward income parity. And we also need to work to get to the 1 to 300 professional standards of NACADA, a goal which we are not at or close to, specifically in PSFA. 24-25 academic year showed that major advisors made approximately 49,000 appointments, whereas the coordinated care advisors saw about 16,000. And this was from the EAB report. So we're doing 3 times what the coordinated care advisors are doing. The data also shows that our graduation rates are increasing, and we too are retention specialists. We need to find a way to absorb the existing resources. So if SDSU is not willing to hire additional professional academic advisors or pay those who do the larger bulk of the work, we'd like to know how we can get that resolved. And finally, the last recommendation I wanted to talk about was the MPP or AVP provost who would be for university advising. Someone specific to academic advising to oversee all of the academic advising functions versus a general student success administrator. Thank you.
Okay. All of those are in progress. I can tell you that there is a whole team from different divisions involved in these discussions. Okay, folks from academic affairs, folks from SACD, and different group. There's a working group working to get on all of these issues. And we'll be presenting those pretty soon. Okay, and the other thing is, as you remember, a few years ago, previous Provost Ochoa and I, we hired 20+ advisors, right? And so we distributed to all these departments, and now we're in the chill. And this year, we're still expected to cut $8.3 million. Right. So as soon as we have some flexibility, we'll be getting more lecturers. But right now, yes. So we'll look at all of that, and then meantime we have this working group presenting their plans pretty soon. Yes.
It was brought up a few moments ago, a question regarding the hiring chill and moving forward with the vice provost position, I think is the title.
Yes.
And you felt it was okay to go forward with it because there's an interim in that spot right now. So the point I want to make is generally someone who has an interim position makes less money than once it's filled at a permanent basis. So why can't we chill that position, save some of those funds? I don't know what the differential would be, but it's probably decent enough to consider that.
Well, the differential is not going to be that big, and also this is an existing position. Yeah, it was a permanent position. Well, that was me 2 years ago, right? And so that was an existing position. So we're just refilling that position.
Again, you could save money though if you kept it an interim until the chill expires.
Yes, Peter.
Following up on that, why do we need a vice provost? I mean, we're not hiring faculty. Students are, you have the student numbers here, as you just pointed out, are continuing to go up. The library is cut, everything has been cut. Why do we need this position?
Well, this position was not a extra or added position. If you look at 5, 10 years back, this position has always existed. Okay, and we're not adding any new. In fact, we have been trimming MPP numbers across the division, and so every division has been trimming them. And this position was not an added position, not an extra new position.
So you just said that you've been trimming MPP positions in academic affairs. APMP has been working on a policy for several years now to update the search committees for university administrators. And we've in fact added, 7 MPPs just in academic affairs. And so I don't see where we're trimming.
Well, as far as I've been there the last 5 years, we have not added any. So no, it's we can look at the tables. We can look at the table.
Can we bring that back to the whole body?
Sure.
All right, I'm not seeing any other hands. Thank you, Provost Tong. Okay, next is President Holstrom.
Hi, everybody. I'll try to be brief for the sake of time. My name is Corrine Holstrom. I'm Associated Students President this year. Thank you for having me, per usual. It's nice to see all of you. I know I'm interrupting a pretty robust discussion, so I apologize for that with my report, but I'll try to be brief. I don't know about you guys, but I love good news. So I'm going to give a little bit of good news before I get started on the 2 topics that I wanted to discuss today. First, I wanted to talk about an AS program as a part of my report. It's called Adapted Athletics. Adapted Athletics has 2 SDSU students in New Delhi, India right now that are competing for the Paralympic World Trials. Alicia, who's an SDSU student, got the bronze women's for discus and shot put, and Chloe, a semifinalist for the 100-meter race. So if you're sticking with that, I know that is awesome. Adapted Athletics is on Instagram, and if you wanted to follow along with those athletes, they're competing again on Sunday, which is really exciting. There's a lot going on all across campus, but what I can say is that students are really pushing to get engaged. So we're seeing record-breaking engagement on not only our social media and students wanting to get connected online, but also in person. Our meeting rooms, our boards, commissions, and committees are filling up and overflowing our meeting rooms in the union, which is super exciting. As far as Aztecs Rock Hunger, which is AS's largest philanthropic campaign that we run, that's going to be starting in the month of October, and it runs October 27th through December 1st. I encourage you all to get engaged. If you're at all engaged with the college councils within your department, we're encouraging them to interact with their staff and faculty to ensure that we can help promote this campaign and help support students, whether that's on the economic crisis response team side, the Jacobs and Cushman Food Bank, or within our AS Food Pantry. A couple events to keep on your radar. On October 27th, there's the Spirit Fest and ARH kickoff. October 29th, Splash for a Cause, which is a dunk tank in the union. If any of you wanted to volunteer, we would also take that. November 12th and 15th is our Friendsgiving event and our community service day. So just some events that you'll see when you're passing through. As far as the academic partnership agreement, which is what is included not only in the agenda, but you have a copy of the resolution that passed through Associated Students in the spring. I wanted to update you on the process, and I know we don't have a lot of time for discussion or feedback, but I welcome that. Pamela Latch, Dr. Latch is taking this on with me in the Academic Policy and Planning Committee, which I'm very gracious for. That's going to be on October 28th, which is going to be the starting place for us with this academic partnership agreement as far as collaboration with the University Senate. I encourage you to read through, and if you have any feedback, proposed changes, or questions, you can reach me via email or we can discuss in that committee. This stemmed out of University Council in the spring, and it's largely focused on grading transparency and reaffirming existing policies that are here on campus. When collaborating on this living document last year, we wanted to ensure shared governance throughout the AS process and with its implementation and impacts on campus. Some of these items are established, but maybe not embraced all around as brought to our attention by college council presidents. And there's also some new stuff worthy of some robust discussion within this committee or potential action. Moving to Academic Policy and Planning Committee was a decision that we made and is included in this document and through discussion with the executive officers and other AS student leaders. I'm bringing this to the Academic Policy and Planning Committee, and then I plan to bring it back to the University Senate after those discussions and feedback is addressed. We'll take note of any questions. I don't know how much time I have today for questions.
4 minutes.
Okay. So with that being said, if I can take note of maybe like 1 or 2 questions, and then the rest of that discussion can reside in that committee meeting on the 28th, but I'm also approachable via email. But if you wanted to.
Thank you for all that work going into this academic partnership agreement. And thank you for APMP for picking it up. I was wondering for sure when it comes back to the Senate, if there could be a resource impact statement, like financial impacts, human impact, technical impact. I also would like to encourage APNP to collaborate with the lecturer affairs committees, where some of these things could, affect lecture time, or maybe even the academic resources committee.
Just a quick comment. If any of you have suggestions or comments beyond what you share in this meeting, feel free to share not only with our associate students representative, but also with any member of APNP, including Pam Lack or myself. And we'll be happy to incorporate your suggestions in our deliberations. Thank you.
Yeah, and I just wanted to respond from the APNP perspective that I'm thinking about this initial conversation with the AS president on October 28th as the start of a conversation. I don't know that we're going to get through everything, and I anticipate us working in some cases on certain policies, in some cases partnering with other committees, whether it's faculty affairs, lecturer affairs, possibly even staff affairs, on some of the other proposals in this. So this is just the start of our conversation. And just to echo Vadim, please let us know if you have any suggestions or things you'd like us to consider as we dig into this document.
Yes, very much a starting point, and we're also open to collaboration with other committees.
Hi, thanks for producing this document. So I'm chair of political science, and I think like a lot of departments had to deal with considerable reductions in ISA money. So I just hope you kind of think about that when you're asking for like more specific grading. I think we would all like to be able to give good grading, but with the university pressure to have bigger and bigger classes and fewer grading, I hope you at least think of strategy for kind of shaming the administration on the practical lack of support they're giving to effective interactive teaching.
Thank you for your feedback.
I would encourage everyone at this time to, what questions you may have or comments or input you want to please share it with either the AS president or Chair Lack, via email. But thank you all for your questions.
Yes, and my email is just as.president@stsu.edu. You can also find me with my first and last name. Thank you all.